Derek Blakeford wasn't supposed to be home yet. A board meeting in Midtown had run late, but halfway through, he realized he'd left the confidential files in his study. He hated delays. He hated forgetfulness even more. His black Bentley rolled to a stop in front of the estate, an elegant stone mansion nestled in the Hudson Valley, shrouded in mist and silence. Odd, this time of day. The nurses would usually be assisting the girls with therapy, or there would be soft music playing for sensory stimulation. But today the house felt still, unnervingly so. Derek stepped inside, his footsteps echoing. No nurse, no voices, no whir of medical monitors. The silence was thick. Then, faintly, he heard it. A soft giggle. Then another. And something else tapping. Rhythmic and unsteady. Frowning, he followed the sounds toward the back of the house. The garden doors loomed ahead. Massive mahogany double doors, slightly ajar. He pushed one open and stepped onto the stone porch, and froze. Ava, Aria, Ivy, his daughters, his fragile, beautiful girls. Diagnosed at 2 with a rare neuromuscular disease. Confined to wheelchairs for most of their lives. Doctors had said walking would be impossible. Yet here they were. Tiny legs wrapped in braces. Little wooden crutches clutched tight. Shaky. Trembling. Standing. Walking. A few unsteady steps, and then they toppled forward. But they didn't fall. A woman caught them, on her knees in the grass. Keisha Rhodes. The new maid. Hired only weeks ago. Quiet. Polite. Practically invisible. Now, tears streamed down her face as she pulled the girls into her arms. "That's it," she whispered. "Again. You can do it again." The girls laughed through sobs, clinging to her. Derek couldn't move, couldn't speak. Keisha looked up, startled to see him. "What is this?" he demanded. His voice came out rough, ragged. "What's going on?" Before she could answer, his daughters turned to him, wide-eyed and pleading. "Daddy, she says the doctors are wrong. She believes in us." Miss Keisha didn't give up. Something shattered inside Derek. Pride, certainty, maybe even guilt. He stared at the woman he barely remembered hiring. And then softly, too softly to hide the crack in his voice, he asked, "How long has this been happening?" Keisha lowered her gaze. Her shoulders trembled, and she whispered, "Since the night I prayed over them." Before we dive into this unbelievable story of miracles, love, and second chances, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, let's continue the story. The house had once echoed with laughter. Now, it only whispered with memory. Derek stood in the hallway, just outside the nursery door, heart pounding like it always did when he came too close. He hadn't stepped into that room in over 6 years. Not since that night. The night the nurse came running, blood on her hands. The night the doctor didn't meet his eyes. The night Eden took her last breath, bringing their daughters into the world. He had named them after her joy. Ava, Aria, Ivy. 3 tiny miracles born from a love that barely had time to live. But the joy was short-lived. The next blow came swift and cruel. "They'll never walk," one specialist had said, eyes sympathetic. "They may never speak. Their muscles aren't responding. It's likely permanent." Permanent. The word dug deep, like a nail hammered into his soul. So Derek did what he knew best. He worked. Buried himself in global meetings and billion-dollar deals. Let nurses handle the feedings. Let therapists come and go. Let time pass like fog over water. And the girls grew, but differently. Their giggles grew quieter. Their playroom, once filled with color, dimmed. Sometimes he'd hear them call him from across the hall, "Daddy?" And he'd freeze, back against the wall, praying they wouldn't ask him to come inside. Because every time he looked at them, he saw Eden, and it broke him. No matter how many experts he hired, progress never came. Hope grew thin, faith even thinner. Then one day, Keisha arrived. She was hired through an agency to cover for a maid on leave. She was quiet, polite, seemed too young, too soft-spoken. She cleaned without being seen and prayed under her breath when she thought no one was listening. No one expected anything from her. And yet, just hours ago, he'd watched his daughters walk in her presence. Derek sat now at the edge of his office chair, head in his hands, mind spinning. The garden lights glowed outside the window, shadows dancing in the breeze. He thought of the way Ava's lips trembled when she said, "Miss Keisha didn't give up." He'd given up. He knew it. Grief had folded him in on himself, and guilt had locked the door. A small knock pulled him from a thought. He looked up. Keisha stood in the doorway, hesitant. "Sir, you wanted to speak with me?" Her hands were clasped tightly. She looked like she wanted to run, but something stronger held her there. Faith, maybe. Derek met her eyes for the first time, not as a maid, but as someone who'd touched something sacred. He swallowed hard. "Keisha," he said, voice rough with years unsaid. "Tell me everything." She stepped into the room, the door slowly closing behind her. And in that moment, something shifted. The silence wasn't just sorrow anymore. It was anticipation. Keisha stood just inside the room, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. Derek gestured to the chair across from him. She sat back straight, face calm, but her eyes held something ancient. Not fear, not pride, just truth. "I know I wasn't supposed to do what I did," she began, voice barely above a whisper. Derek leaned forward. "But I saw something in them, their eyes, their hands, the way their toes curled when they laughed. I saw life, not just the diagnosis." He said nothing. Let her speak. "I've seen it before," Keisha continued. "My little brother, Caleb. Doctors said he'd never walk either. Spinal damage from birth. My mama cried for weeks, but she didn't stop praying, and I didn't stop working with him." She smiled faintly. It took years, but he walked down the aisle at his middle school graduation. With braces. With help. But he walked. Derek's throat tightened. "That's why I took this job," she admitted. "It wasn't just work. When I saw the girls," she paused, eyes glassing over. "I knew that look. That loneliness. That hunger for someone to believe." He stared at her, stunned. "I started small," she said. "Stretching therapy during bath time, massaging their legs, whispering encouragement. I'd sing hymns while stimulating their calves. I turned music into balance drills, games into therapy." Derek blinked. "You did this alone?" Keisha nodded. "The head housekeeper warned me. Said you'd fire me if I gave false hope." But this wasn't false. The girls responded right away, especially Arya. Her ankles started flexing on their own. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. She placed it on the desk. Inside were pages, dates, notes, therapy logs, prayer entries, even doodles the girls had made. Derek flipped through, speechless. April 3rd. Ivy stood for 2.3 seconds without support. I cried. "Thank you, Jesus." Psalm 147 verse 3. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. The scripture hit him harder than he expected. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked softly. Keisha looked up. "Because I didn't want to tell. I wanted to show." Just then, a knock interrupted them. The door creaked open, and 3 tiny shadows tiptoed in. "Miss Keisha," Ivy whispered, running to her. "We waited for you." Arya and Ava followed, wrapping their arms around Keisha like she was their mother, their teacher, their anchor. Derek couldn't look away. He had built this house, paid for the best care, hired everyone except someone who believed. Keisha had no degrees, no medals, no permission, but she had faith. She had love, and she had done what he, with all his wealth and willpower, could not. He looked at her, voice hollowed by humility. "Show me." Keisha's eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. She had worked in secret. Now the secret was out. Morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, casting golden lines across the marble countertop. For the first time in years, Derek Blakeford wasn't on a plane or a conference call. He was at the table. Home. The silence was thick at first. Ava peeked around the corner, eyes wide. "Is he eating here?" Arya nudged Ivy and whispered, "Don't stare." But Ivy marched in boldly. "Hi, Daddy." He looked up, caught off guard by how small their voices still were. "Good morning," he said gently. Ava climbed into the chair beside him, squinting. "Do you know our names?" The question struck deep. "Yes," he said slowly. "I do. Ava, Arya, Ivy. I know them. I just haven't said them enough." They giggled, surprised by his honesty. For a moment, the awkwardness faded, and the sound of spoons clinking and juice pouring filled the air like music. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. Later, Derek stepped onto the back patio. Keisha stood barefoot in the grass, steadying Ivy's legs while counting softly. 1, 2, balance, good girl. The other girls waited their turn, crutches in hand, eager and wobbly. Derek watched as Keisha bent low, whispering encouragement like sacred words. He walked down the steps, heart thudding. "May I help?" he asked. Keisha blinked, surprised, but nodded. "Start with holding their hands. Let them lean on your knees. Don't rush it." He crouched beside Arya, his hands trembling. She looked up at him, smiling like the sun had come to visit. "Daddy, you're practicing too," she beamed. "I guess I am," he whispered. He followed Keisha's guidance. His movements were clumsy. Once he lost his balance and nearly tipped over, but the girls only laughed. "You're doing it wrong," Ivy giggled. "I probably am," Derek smiled. "But I'm trying." That afternoon, the grass turned golden under the afternoon light. Derek stepped back, watching his daughters take slow, deliberate steps. Each one unsteady, but each one real. He felt it rise slowly, unexpectedly. Grief, guilt, regret. He slipped inside, leaned against the kitchen wall, and finally let the tears come. "I've missed so much," he whispered. "God, I don't deserve them." His hands covered his face. Years of running, numbing, pretending. None of it had healed the whole Eden left behind. But somehow these tiny feet, these trembling legs, were leading him back. Outside, Keisha called, "Mr. Blakeford?" He wiped his face and stepped out. "Watch this," Ava shouted. Together, the girls stood, no crutches, just braced legs and courage. They held each other's hands, wobbled, then stood tall, steady, smiling, longer than they ever had before. Derek's breath caught, not just at their strength, but at their joy, their hope, their faith. And for the first time in years, Derek didn't feel like a stranger in his own story. He felt like a father. The house, once defined by echoes of absence, was now full of life. Every morning, Derek found himself waiting, coffee in hand, sneakers on, ready for therapy in the garden. It had become a rhythm, a sacred routine. Keisha would arrive just after sunrise, hair tied up, Bible tucked beneath her arm. The triplets would roll out in their chairs, sleepy but excited. Day by day, second by second, hope returned. 5 seconds became 15. 15 became 30. Now, Ava could stand for nearly a full minute before her knees gave out. "You see that?" Keisha grinned one morning, clapping her hands as Ivy balanced for 40 seconds straight. That's strength and faith working together. She wasn't just healing their legs. She was stirring their spirits. Derek watched in awe, soaking up every technique. How Keisha adjusted their feet, whispered affirmations, how she turned therapy into laughter. One afternoon, as Arya held herself steady against his shoulder, he asked, "How do you know exactly what they need?" Keisha smiled without looking up. "Because I pray before every session." Her answer disarmed him more than any medical explanation ever could. Inside the mansion, change didn't go unnoticed. The staff whispered in quiet amazement. "He eats dinner at the table now. He laughs with them." He even helped Ivy pick out a hair ribbon. One night, over lasagna and spilled juice, Ivy wiped her mouth with a napkin twice her size and asked shyly, "Daddy, will you read to us tonight?" The room froze. Derek hadn't read a bedtime story since the night Eden died. He looked at Keisha. She gave a small, reassuring nod. "I'd love to," he said. In the girl's bedroom, surrounded by pink blankets and stuffed animals, with worn eyes, Derek opened Goodnight Moon. His voice trembled at first, but as Arya snuggled against him, it steadied. "Good night, stars. Good night, air." When he looked up, Keisha was watching from the doorway, arms folded, eyes soft. From that night on, she became more than just staff. She became part of them. Derek began noticing her differently. The way she hummed gospel songs while folding blankets. The way the triplets called her our angel. The way her faith was quiet but unshakable, woven into everything she did. One afternoon, as golden light poured across the garden grass, something happened. Ava stood with her usual wobble, but this time, she didn't reach for her crutches. Keisha knelt a few feet away, arms open. "Come on, baby girl. One little step." Derek held his breath. Ava's lip quivered. She looked down at her feet, then forward, and she moved. Just one tiny, trembling step, into Keisha's waiting arms. They both collapsed into laughter and tears, holding each other like the world had changed, because, in that moment it had. Derek's eyes welled. His knees weakened. God was doing something here. Not just in their legs, but in their lives. The Bentley wasn't expected. It swept up the drive late in the afternoon, sleek, silver, and far too polished for surprise visits. A woman stepped out, heels sharp against the stone walkway, her dress tailored, lips crimson, eyes masked behind designer sunglasses. Victoria Harrow. Derek recognized her instantly. Philanthropist, heiress, owner of a national chain of rehabilitation centers, and more importantly, dangerously curious. She smiled as he met her at the door. Derek Blakeford, still pretending not to care what the world says about you. He forced a smile. "Victoria, what brings you to the middle of the Hudson Valley?" "I heard a miracle happened here," she replied, removing her sunglasses. Rumors travel fast in elite circles, especially when children start walking after years of paralysis. Derek stiffened. Victoria's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Keisha, who had just entered from a hallway, still holding Ivy's therapy log. "And you," Victoria said, approaching, "must be the angel everyone's whispering about." Keisha looked startled. "I'm just there." "You're extraordinary," Victoria interrupted. "I have a son, Jason. Same diagnosis, same predictions. But you've done what our specialists haven't. I want you on my team." She pulled out a sleek folder and handed it to Keisha. "Full salary, 6 figures, a home on my estate, medical benefits, and coverage for your brother's therapy and your mother's prescriptions." Keisha froze. Derek watched her face pale. Victoria turned slightly, her voice honeyed and sharp. Some people don't realize the treasure they have until someone else shows up with eyes to see it. Keisha said nothing. She nodded politely and excused herself. Later that evening, the house was quiet. The girls were asleep. Derek found Keisha on the back porch, sitting on the swing bench, clutching the contract with trembling hands. She hadn't noticed him yet. Moonlight traced her face, revealing silent tears slipping down her cheeks. He paused, not wanting to intrude, but then he heard her whisper, "Lord, what do I do?" She wiped her eyes, her voice cracking. "Mom's getting worse. I can't afford her meds. And Caleb's therapy. God, you know I didn't come here looking for this offer. I just wanted to help those girls. But now," her shoulders shook. "I don't know what to do." Derek stepped back quietly, heart heavy. She hadn't asked for any of this. Not attention, not praise, not even thanks. Just enough to help her family. His chest tightened with guilt. He had the power to make things right, but he hadn't even asked about her life. He'd seen her strength, her faith, her devotion to his daughters. But now he saw her need, and it broke something open inside him. Therapy sessions grew quiet. The laughter that once filled the garden was now replaced with uncertain glances and silence between steps. The girls sensed it, even if no one said it aloud. Ava clung tighter to Keisha's hand. Aria's balance faltered more than usual. Ivy asked repeatedly, "Are we still practicing tomorrow, Miss Keisha?" Keisha kept smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. That afternoon, Derek watched from the patio, arms crossed, heart tight. He couldn't stand the tension anymore. "Keisha," he said gently, stepping down into the grass, "can we talk?" She nodded and followed him inside. In the quiet of the sunroom, he faced her. "If you need to leave, I won't stop you." Her eyes welled immediately. "Don't say that." "I heard you the other night," he admitted. "You're carrying so much. I didn't know. I should have." She sat slowly, hands shaking. "I don't want to leave them. They're like my own. But my mom needs medication we can't afford. Caleb's therapy sessions were canceled last week. I've been holding it together with prayers and duct tape." Derek sat across from her, guilt washing over him like a flood. "You've given everything to this house, to my daughters, and I've barely asked you how you're surviving." A sudden burst of footsteps interrupted them. The triplets had been listening. "Miss Keisha, don't go." Ivy cried, rushing into Keisha's lap. "You're our miracle," Ava sobbed. Aria clung to Keisha's arm, whispering, "We'll get worse without you. We know we will." Keisha wrapped them all in her arms, her own tears falling now. "Sweet girls, I don't want to go." Derek turned away, unable to watch the heartbreak unfold. This was what he feared most, loss. He had lost Eden. He had nearly lost the girls emotionally. Now the woman who brought light back into their lives might vanish too. But this time he wouldn't run. That night, after the girls were asleep, Derek sat alone in his office, poring through contracts, benefit plans, charitable trust models, paper after paper, spreadsheet after spreadsheet. He made calls. He emailed contacts. He read through Caleb's medical evaluations and insurance forms Keisha had left behind, hoping someone could help. By midnight, the house was still. But something inside Derek had awakened. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, the father, the man of the house, the steward of this home. And he would not lose Keisha. Not now. Not like this. The next morning, he knocked on the doorframe of the staff quarters, Keisha still in her robe, Bible in hand. "Can you meet me in the library?" he asked softly. She blinked. "Of course." He nodded once, turned, and walked down the hall, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from purpose. The library still smelled like old paper and pine wood oil. Keisha stepped inside slowly, unsure of what to expect. The early morning sun streamed through the tall windows, catching the dust like tiny halos in the air. Derek stood near the fireplace, a folder in his hands. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her with something different in his eyes. Not pity, not obligation, honor. "I worked through the night," he began. "Not because I'm trying to keep you here out of desperation, but because this family has already been yours for a while. We just didn't say it." He handed her the folder. She opened it with trembling fingers. Triple salary. A 3-bedroom cottage on the estate grounds, fully renovated for her mother's accessibility needs. Full medical coverage for both her mother and Caleb. And a letter of sponsorship from a top university's remote program for pediatric physical therapy. Keisha gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Derek, you're not staff," he interrupted gently. "You're family." Tears poured before she could stop them. Her knees gave out, and she sat right there on the velvet reading chair, shoulders shaking with the weight of it all. "No one has ever done something like this for me. Ever." Derek knelt beside her. "You already gave us a miracle, Keisha. Let us give something back." Before she could answer, the door burst open. "Miss Keisha," Ava shouted. All 3 girls ran in, wobbling, but on their own feet. No crutches, no braces, just tiny, determined legs, moving toward her with giggles and squeals of pride. "We did it," Arya cried. "We walked all the way from the stairs." "We practiced all night," Ivy grinned. "For you." Keisha stood, stunned, arms outstretched. The girls collapsed into her embrace, laughing, crying, holding on like they'd never let go again. Derek watched the scene unfold, his throat thick with emotion. His daughters walking, his heart full, his grief transformed. Keisha looked up through tears, and in that moment, it was more than just a decision. It was home. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Derek smiled, a tear finally slipping free. "Thank God." They stood there together, Keisha, Derek, and 3 little miracles wrapped in arms of love, all of them undone by the weight of grace. It wasn't just a breakthrough in movement. It was a breakthrough in belonging. The mansion that once held silence now overflowed with joy, laughter, and hope reborn. And in the center of it all stood a woman who had refused to give up. Not on a child, not on a family, not on faith. Keisha stayed. 3 months later, the garden bloomed with more than just flowers. Laughter rang through the trees like wind chimes. Bare feet pattered across the soft grass. Tiny shoes were left forgotten near the porch steps, because now the Blakeford triplets ran. Ava chased butterflies. Arya raced Ivy down the garden path. No crutches, no braces, just strength, joy, and freedom. Keisha stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes brimming with pride. "They don't even look back anymore," she whispered with a smile. "Because they know someone's always watching," Derek said from behind her, holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one, and together they watched the girls sprint through the field Eden had once dreamed of planting tulips in. The mansion no longer felt haunted. Now it pulsed with life. Meals around the table, music playing in the kitchen, prayer before bed, laughter echoing up the stairs. Derek had transformed, not by willpower, but by presence. He braided hair. He read bedtime stories without stumbling. He learned to say "I love you" like it wasn't foreign in his mouth anymore. Keisha's mother now lived in the cottage near the orchard, her body healing in peace. Caleb had already nicknamed the estate God's backyard. One evening, as golden light spilled across the sky, Derek and Keisha strolled the garden path together. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. "I used to think my job was to fix things," Derek finally said. "Control everything. Provide, protect, but I was hiding. From the girls. From God. For myself. He stopped walking, turned to her. You didn't just save them, Keisha. You saved me. Her eyes softened, but she said nothing, just reached for his hand and held it quietly. The sunset turned sky into stained glass. Just then, tiny voices shouted from across the field. Mama Keisha. Keisha blinked, heart thudding. The triplets barreled toward her, arms wide. We made flower crowns for you. Keisha knelt as they wrapped her in wildflowers and giggles, all three chanting, Mama Keisha, Mama Keisha. She laughed, covering her face with her hands, overwhelmed by the moment. Derek stood behind them, eyes filled to the brim. He didn't wipe the tears. He let them fall. Because some moments deserve to be felt fully. And some families aren't born, they're built. Through sorrow, through second chances, through love that refuses to give up. Keisha stood, girl still clinging to her waist, and looked at Derek. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Because in this sacred place, this once silent mansion, faith had rewritten every ending. And as the wind danced through the tulips, one final truth settled in Derek's heart. Sometimes miracles don't fall from the sky. Sometimes they walk into your kitchen, wearing borrowed shoes, and change your life forever.